For 15 years, James Mitchell had stood guard at Windsor Castle's King Henry Gate, with unwavering discipline, his spotless uniform and perfect posture earning him a reputation as the royal service's most dedicated protector. On this misty morning, a small girl in wrinkled green pajamas approached his post, her eyes filled with a desperate fear, and whispered 5 words that made his blood run cold. Protocol dictated he couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even acknowledge her presence. Years of training and sacrifice had drilled that into him. But what he would soon discover about this mysterious child would shatter his carefully ordered world and force him to question whether his true duty lay in standing still or taking action that could cost him everything. Before we dive into this powerful story, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe. The pale, cold light of dawn crept over Windsor, casting long shadows across the cobblestones still wet from a thin drizzle. The city stirred slowly, reluctant to shake off the remnants of sleep. James, a royal guard known for his unwavering strictness and discipline, walked through the waking streets on his way to King Henry Gate, one of the quieter entrances to Windsor Castle. As he made his way through the market square, the air filled with the mingling scents of freshly baked bread and damp earth. A few merchants had already begun setting up their stalls, their movements sluggish in the early morning chill. James's keen eyes swept over the scene, ever vigilant even in these quiet moments. It was then that he caught sight of a small figure darting between the stalls. A little girl, no older than 7 or 8, moved with surprising agility for one so young. Her dark curls bounced as she navigated the maze of half-assembled displays, her green pajamas a stark contrast to the muted colors of the morning market. James watched intrigued as the girl skillfully plucked a scone from an unattended tray and slipped into the shadows of a nearby alley. The vendor turned a moment too late, missing the theft entirely. For a brief moment, James considered intervening, but his duty called. With a slight frown, he continued toward the castle, the image of the girl in green pajamas lingering in his mind. The cobblestones echoed his measured steps as he approached King Henry Gate. The imposing structure of Windsor Castle loomed behind him, its spires stretching toward the grey sky, like fingers reaching for the heavens. James took his position, his posture perfect, his gaze steady. He was the very picture of a royal guard, unyielding and resolute. As the morning unfolded, the quiet near King Henry Gate lay undisturbed, an oasis of stillness within the ancient walls of Windsor Castle. This entrance, less frequented and known more for its practical function than grandeur, stood in stark contrast to the opulent facades that tourists flocked to photograph. Beyond, the town hummed with distant life. But here only an occasional passerby broke the silence, footsteps briefly intruding before fading away, leaving only the quiet in their wake. This silence was both serene and lonely. James stood at his post, attuned to the subtle divide between this tranquil corner and the lively town he couldn't quite see. Yet the faint pulse of its activity reached him as a low, distant murmur, drifting on the edges of his senses. From where he stood, though, nature's sounds took precedence. The sharp caw of crows echoed against stone, their cries a fleeting reminder of the untamed world beyond the walls. Water dripped from a weathered gutter, each metallic note creating a steady rhythm that deepened his solitary watch. The solitude suited his duties as he held his stoic stance, yet he found his mind drifting back and forth to the memory of the girl in green pajamas, a vivid contrast against the regimented greys of his world. The sun climbed higher in the sky, burning away the morning mist and bringing with it the promise of a warmer day. James maintained his expression as he surveyed the area. His eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the perimeter with practiced efficiency. Years of training had honed his senses, allowing him to detect even the slightest irregularity in his surroundings. A group of children suddenly appeared in the distance, their laughter carried on the warm breeze. They ran and played, their carefree antics a stark contrast to James's rigid posture. Despite his best efforts to maintain his professional demeanor, a rare flicker of warmth crossed his face as he watched them. The sight of the children stirred memories he usually kept carefully locked away. Thoughts of his own daughter, whom he had rarely seen since his divorce, bubbled to the surface. He recalled one particular morning, her stubbornness to wear her pajamas to school even after shower, insisting on wearing her favorite set. The memory brought a bittersweet ache to his chest. This train of thought inevitably led him back to the girl he had seen earlier in the market square. The image of her stealing bread gnawed at him, hinting at a larger, more troubling story. James found himself wondering about her circumstances, a feeling of unease settling in his stomach. Who was she? Why was she alone so early in the morning, and in her pajamas no less? And where were her parents? These questions nagged at him, a quiet yet persistent itch he couldn't scratch. The weight of duty pressed heavily on James as he stood, his uniform a constant reminder of his role. His training urged him to focus, to set aside distractions, yet a quiet voice within whispered that true duty sometimes meant more than following orders. He looked out over the castle grounds, a symbol of history and tradition he'd always taken pride in protecting, but for the first time, he questioned where his responsibility truly lay. Was his loyalty solely to the crown, or did it also extend to the people of Windsor, even to a small girl? The children's laughter at the far side of the castle faded as their parents gathered them up, leading them away from the grounds. Silence descended once more, broken only by the distant rumble of traffic and the whisper of wind through the trees. Just as the quiet settled in, a flicker of movement caught his attention. From an alley opposite his post, a small figure emerged. It was the girl in the green pajamas, the one he had seen earlier in the market square. She walked hesitantly toward him, her eyes wide and locked onto his with an almost unnerving intensity. As she drew closer, James could see the details he had missed before. Her dark curls were tangled and unkempt. Her pajamas were wrinkled and smudged with dirt. Crumbs clung to the corner of her lips, a reminder of the stolen bread. Despite his training, James felt a twinge of concern for this troubled child. The girl stopped a few paces away from him, her small frame tense with what seemed to be a mixture of fear and determination. For a moment, she simply stared at him, as if gathering her courage. Then, in a voice that was fragile yet filled with a surprising resolve, she spoke. "Sir, are you a hero? I need your help." The question pierced through James's carefully constructed composure. In all his years of service, he had never been addressed in such a manner, especially not by a child. The weight of his duties pressed down on him, reminding him of the strict protocols he was bound to follow. He held his disciplined silence, even as a part of him yearned to respond, to ask what trouble had brought this young girl to seek out a hero. The girl's gaze remained fixed on him, hope and desperation mingling in her eyes. As the seconds ticked by and James maintained his silence, he saw that hope begin to fade. Her shoulders sagged, as if an invisible weight had settled upon them. The transformation was heart-wrenching to witness, even for someone as disciplined as James. Without another word, the girl turned away, her head bowed in disappointment. She disappeared back into the alley from which she had emerged, leaving James with a pang of regret and confusion that he couldn't quite shake. If she was merely a street thief, as he had initially assumed, why would she approach a royal guard? Why ask for help? As James resumed his vigilant watch, the girl's plea echoed in his thoughts, challenging his notion of duty. He had always believed that his role was clear-cut, to protect the royal premises and maintain order, but now, for the first time in years, he found himself questioning whether there might be more to his calling. The remainder of his shift passed in a blur of conflicting emotions and persistent doubts. As his break approached, James felt uncharacteristically distracted, and by the time his relief arrived, the sun was high, its heat pressing down on him. After reporting his hour to the commander's office, he didn't head to the break room as usual. Instead, compelled by an unshakable urgency, he set off toward the alley where the girl had vanished, the sun-warmed cobblestones firm beneath his feet. The alley was narrow and dim, cluttered with debris spilling from overflowing bins. A faint foul odor lingered mingling unpleasantly with the usual city smells. James's eyes swept over every shadow, every doorway, searching for a flash of green pajamas or the sight of dark, bouncing curls. But the girl was nowhere in sight. Undeterred, James pressed on, retracing his steps to the old market square where he had first spotted her. The market was now in full swing, a cacophony of voices haggling over prices and the clatter of goods being unpacked. He moved through the crowd, his uniform parting the sea of shoppers like a ship's prow through waves. A flash of movement caught his eye, dark braids bobbing through the crowd. James's heart leapt as he approached, only to sink again when he realized it wasn't the girl he was looking for. The child's mother, noticing his approach, looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "Would you like a photo with the guard, sweetheart?" she asked her daughter, misinterpreting James's interest. James, caught off guard, nodded stiffly. He posed for a quick picture, all the while scanning the crowd for any sign of the girl in pajamas. As soon as the photo was taken, the girl and the mother excused themselves, and James continued his search. His next stop was the baker's stall, where he had seen the girl steal the bread earlier that morning. The baker, a portly man with flour dusting his apron, looked up as James approached. "Good day, sir," James said, his voice formal despite the urgency he felt. "I'm currently on my break, and I'm inquiring about a young girl I saw here this morning. Dark hair, green pajamas. Have you seen her since?" The baker's brow furrowed in thought. "Can't say I have, officer. Lots of kids running about, you know, but green pajamas, you say? That's a bit odd, isn't it?" James nodded, hesitating for a moment before adding, "She may have taken a scone without paying." The baker's expression darkened slightly, but he waved a hand dismissively. "Ah, well, wouldn't be the first time some urchins nicked a bit of bread. Times are hard for some folks. Can't say I noticed anything specific, though." Thanking the baker, James moved on, his mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. He had mentioned the theft deliberately, unsure of where it might lead. Though the baker seemed indifferent, would he later remark that a royal guard had meddled in street matters? Now James found himself questioning his own motives. Was he truly concerned for the girl's welfare, or was this simply a misguided attempt to uphold the law? He walked around the square to the neighboring streets, to the back alleys and its dwindling ways. He even almost stained his booth in grease puddles, but saw not a glimpse of her. As his break time dwindled, James realized he was no closer to finding the girl than when he started. The neighborhood had yielded no clues, and the alley remained a dead end. With a heavy heart, he began to make his way back to his post at King Henry Gate. As James approached the gate, the castle rose imposingly before him, a steadfast reminder of his duty and the protocols he was bound to follow. Nearing the commander's tower, he spotted Oscar, a fellow royal guard and longtime friend, casually leaning against the wall nearby. Oscar was on his break, a paper cup of tea in his hand. They had served together for over a decade, sharing the unique pressures and privileges of guarding the royal family. "All right there, James," Oscar called out, his tone friendly but edged with a hint of concern. "You look like you've been on some kind of mission." He nodded as James approached and shifted aside a few steps to make room for him. James hesitated for a moment before deciding to confide in his colleague. "I've been looking for someone," he admitted, his voice low. "A little girl I saw this morning. She was wearing green pajamas, of all things. Did you see her?" Oscar chuckled, taking a sip of his tea. "No, but let me tell you about kids these days, eh? My own little one once insisted on going to school in his bathrobe. Proper tantrum he threw that morning." But James didn't smile at the anecdote. His face remained serious as he continued. "This was different, Oscar. She was alone, stealing food, and later she came up to me, asking for help, said she needed a hero." He paused, the weight of the encounter still heavy on his mind. Something's not right. Oscar's expression sobered as he listened. When James finished, he let out a long sigh. "Look, mate," he began, his tone cautious. "I get it. It's not easy seeing kids in trouble, but you've got to remember our job here." James nodded, knowing what was coming next. "We're not beat cops, James," Oscar continued, his voice taking on a note of warning. "Our duty is to the Crown, to the royal family, and to the security of these grounds. Street issues, that's for the police to handle. We can't go chasing after every sad story we come across." "I know, but—" James started, but Oscar held up a hand. "Remember when we first joined up? They drilled it into us. We're the last line of defense for the monarchy. We don't patrol the streets. We don't investigate crimes. We don't even make arrests unless it's on royal property. Our job is to stand guard, to be vigilant, to protect the institution we serve." James felt frustration building inside him. "But surely we have a duty to help people in need, Oscar. We're not just statues." Oscar's face softened with understanding. "I know how you feel, mate. Really, I do. Remember that incident a few years back? The tourist who collapsed right in front of my post?" James nodded, recalling the event. "I wanted to help, to do something, but our training kicked in. I called for medical assistance and maintained my post. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, standing there while others rushed to help. But that's our job, James. We maintain order, we protect the Crown, we stand our ground no matter what." James opened his mouth to protest, but Oscar continued, "I'm not saying it's right, mind you, but that's the way it is. Standing on post may feel harder than solving real problems, but it's our job. Don't risk your rank over it." A moment of silence fell between them, as James absorbed Oscar's words. He knew his friend was right, at least according to the letter of their duty. But something in him rebelled against the idea of turning a blind eye. Oscar, seeming to sense James's inner conflict, added in a softer tone, "Look, I've known you for 15 years now? Served together through thick and thin. I know you've got a big heart. It's what makes you good at this job. You care, but sometimes caring too much can be dangerous in our line of work." James nodded slowly, appreciating Oscar's concern. "I hear you, Oscar, I do, but this felt different. She wasn't just some common thief. She was scared, alone." Oscar finished his tea and crumpled the cup in his hand. "I understand, mate. I do, but we've got to trust that the right people will handle it. The police, social services, that's their domain. We've got our own crucial role to play." He paused, placing a hand on James's shoulder. "Just be careful, James," he said, his voice a mixture of concern and resignation. "You're a good man, and a damn fine guard. I'd hate to see you throw away everything you've worked for over this. Promise me you'll think hard before doing anything rash?" James felt the weight of Oscar's words, the genuine concern of a friend who had stood beside him through countless shifts, royal events, and tense security situations. He knew Oscar was looking out for him, trying to protect him from the consequences of breaking protocol. "I promise I'll be careful," James said finally. "Thanks for looking out for me, Oscar." Oscar nodded, a small smile breaking through his serious expression. "Always, mate. That's what friends are for. Now I'd better get back to my post before the commander has both our hides. Break time's over." James nodded as Oscar walked away, appreciating his friend's advice and concern, rooted in years of shared experience and genuine camaraderie. Yet, as he returned to his post, a lingering feeling told him this situation was different. The girl's face, her quiet plea, the mystery surrounding her, all of it stirred something deep within him. Every instinct he had urged him to help. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across Windsor Castle's grounds, James resumed his post. His stance was as rigid as ever, but his mind was anything but settled. Oscar's words echoed in his thoughts, intertwining with the memory of the girl haunting him even now. A few moments later, James realized with a start that in his haste to search for the girl during his break, he had neglected to eat or drink anything. The realization hit him along with a wave of fatigue. His throat felt parched, and a dull ache had begun to throb behind his eyes. The weight of his uniform, usually a source of pride, now felt oppressive in the late afternoon heat. Sweat trickled down his back, and he had to consciously focus on maintaining his stance. The heavy fabric seemed to amplify his discomfort, clinging to his skin and trapping the warmth of the day. James blinked hard, trying to clear the spots that had begun to dance at the edges of his vision. He knew he was pushing his limits, but the thought of abandoning his post, even for a moment, was unthinkable. He had already bent the rules once today. He couldn't afford another lapse. Just as the light-headedness threatened to overwhelm him, a flicker of movement caught his eye. At first, he thought it might be a trick of the light, a result of his fatigue. But then he saw it again, a flash of green near the alley where he had last seen the girl. His heart quickened as the small figure emerged from the shadows. It was her, the girl in the green pajamas, but this time she wasn't alone. Clutched tightly in her arms was a worn teddy bear, its fur matted and stained with dark marks. The girl approached slowly, her eyes wide and fixed on James. He could see the fear in her gaze, but also a glimmer of hope. It was that hope that broke through his resolve. "Sir, I've been searching for help throughout the day, but no one's helping me. The police didn't look at me, but sir, you are not dressed like the police. You look like a hero, and a hero usually helps." James cleared his throat, feeling it dry and scratchy. He swallowed, but his mouth remained parched. "Breaking protocol," he whispered, his voice scarcely louder than a breath. "Who are you, little girl?" The child's eye widened at his reply. She hesitated for a moment before responding, her voice small but clear. "Tamara. My name is Tamara," she whispered back. James blinked, his composed exterior slipping further. "And the bear, Tamara? What's happened to it?" he murmured, hoping his voice would reach her through the gentle breeze. He dared not speak louder, wary of drawing attention to himself, afraid someone might see. Tamara held out the stuffed animal, and James's breath caught in his throat. The dark stains were unmistakable now, and the metallic scent that reached his nostrils confirmed his fears. It was blood. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently in a hushed voice, his eyes scanning her for any sign of injury. Tamara shook her head, but her expression was one of pure terror. "It's not mine," she whispered, her voice trembling. James felt a chill run down his spine despite the heat. "Whose is it? What's happened?" But instead of answering, Tamara's eyes filled with tears. "Please," she begged, "you have to come with me. You have to help." The conflict that had been brewing in James all day reached its peak. Every instinct, every rule, every protocol he had ever learned told him to stay at his post. But the desperation in Tamara's eyes, the blood on the bear, the mystery that had haunted him since morning, it all pulled at him with an irresistible force. "I can't leave my post," he said, the words feeling hollow even as he spoke them. "But I'll be on break in 2 hours. Can you come back then? I promise I'll help you." Tamara's face fell, disappointment and fear warring in her expression. Without another word she turned and ran, disappearing once more into the winding alleys beyond King Henry Gate. James watched her go, his heart pounding. He had made a promise, one he intended to keep. But as the minutes ticked by, each feeling like an eternity, he couldn't shake the feeling that 2 hours might be too long to wait and the girl might not return. As Tamara's small figure disappeared into the mouth of the alley, James felt a sudden surge of panic. The sight of the blood-stained bear and the terror in the girl's eyes gnawed at him, overriding years of disciplined training. "Wait!" he called out, chasing after the girl. His voice echoed through the space. But Tamara didn't stop. She vanished further into the winding streets of Windsor, leaving James with a critical decision to make. He glanced back at his post, the weight of his rank on his chest. The area was quiet, and no one seemed to have noticed his momentary lapse. He could return now, and likely no one would be the wiser. But the image of Tamara's pleading eyes and the blood-stained bear wouldn't leave his mind. At that moment, James made a choice. With a deep breath, he ran further away from his post in the direction Tamara had gone. His heavy boots echoed on the cobblestones as he navigated the narrow alleys, his eyes scanning for any sign of the girl. The back streets of Windsor were a labyrinth, and James found himself turning corners and doubling back, always feeling one step behind. Just as he was about to give up hope, he caught a glimpse of green darting around a corner. "Tamara!" he called out, picking up his pace. "Wait!" He rounded the corner and found himself face to face with a dilapidated building. A weathered sign above the door read St. James's Orphanage. The place was a sorry sight, with chipped paint, broken windows, and a neglected yard that spoke volumes of its poor reputation in Windsor. Tamara crouched low, tucked behind the large rubbish bins, her gaze fixed anxiously on the gate. Her small hand clutched the edge of the bin as though it could shield her from the world. When she looked up at James, her eyes held a fragile mix of relief and fear, as if she couldn't quite believe he had come. "Shh," she said, "down low." She told him to hide. James glanced down at his polished boots, hesitating as he saw the grime and puddles pooling around the rubbish bins. The stench of refuse hung thick in the air, and he knew stepping closer would risk staining his pristine uniform. Yet seeing Tamara crouched there, her small, fearful eyes watching him, he felt the weight of his hesitation. In that moment, the cleanliness of his uniform seemed insignificant beside her need for reassurance and safety. "Is this where you live?" James asked, bending down to her height, his heart pounding, breath hanging in the warm air. Tamara nodded, her grip on the gate tightening. "I ran away," she admitted in a small voice. "And how did you manage that?" James asked, kneeling down to her level. "Well, I'm used to being quick and silent," Tamara replied, a hint of pride in her voice despite her obvious distress. "Of course you do." James frowned, remembering how quick she was this morning when stealing from the baker's stall. "But why are you still here if you ran away?" Tamara's eyes filled with tears as she began to explain. She and her best friend, Mesa, had planned to escape the orphanage together. They couldn't bear the relentless bullying and cruelty they endured daily, especially from the older children. Tamara had managed to get away, but Mesa had hesitated at the last moment and was caught. "I couldn't leave her behind," Tamara said, her voice breaking. "I've been trying to help her." James's mind flashed back to the stolen scone he had witnessed that morning. "Is that why you were taking food from the market?" Tamara nodded, shame and defiance warring in her expression. "I was hungry, and I wanted to bring food to Mesa. I passed it to her through the backyard fence." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "She gave me this note in exchange. It explains about the teddy bear." James took the note with a growing sense of dread. As he unfolded it and began to read, Tamara's eyes never left his face, watching for his reaction. The note, written in a childish scrawl, told a harrowing tale. After being caught during the escape attempt, Mesa had been punished by being put in a room with the older children. Late one night, these older kids decided to punish Mesa simply for being in their space. They had woken her from sleep, cornered her, and forced her to the edge of the winding staircase. Mesa, terrified and confused, had clutched her teddy bear tightly as they cruelly pushed her down the stairs. James felt his stomach turn as he read about Mesa's fall. She had tumbled down the rough steps, rolling over and over, still holding onto her bear. When she finally came to a stop on the ground floor, her body had struck a table, sending a heavy ceramic vase crashing down on her. The vase had shattered on impact, cutting deeply across Mesa's brow and the bridge of her nose. She had lain there, stunned and bleeding, her beloved bear soaking up the blood that pooled around her. The older children, realizing the severity of what they'd done, had fled, leaving Mesa injured and alone in the darkened hall. As James finished reading, he looked up at Tamara, his face pale with shock and anger. But Tamara wasn't finished. In a trembling voice, she told him about Mrs. Odette, the cold and indifferent caretaker of the orphanage. "Mrs. Odette," she began, almost spitting out the name. "She's the caretaker. We have to call her Mother, but—" She paused, glancing down as if ashamed, though the shame was never hers to bear. "But she was never nice to us. Not to any of us." James leaned forward, his fists clenching as Tamara went on, her voice growing softer, almost as if speaking louder would make the memories more real. "She'd lock us in our rooms if we made a sound after lights out," she whispered. "Even if someone was sick, even if they cried, she'd say it was our fault, that we were being selfish, wasting her time or disturbing her sleep." Tamara's small hand gripped the edge of her coat as she spoke, her gaze fixed on the ground. "Sometimes," she said, voice barely audible. She wouldn't let us eat if she thought we'd been bad. She'd make us line up and tell us one by one why we didn't deserve dinner, even the littlest ones. Tamara's voice grew softer, each word weighed down by the memory. That's why, when Mrs. Odette found Mesa bleeding on the floor, she punished her again. Her lips trembled, and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Mesa told me Mrs. Odette didn't care when she was hurt. She just looked at her like she was dirt. Tamara paused, gripping the cold bars of the gate as if to steady herself. I was hiding here when I saw Mrs. Odette throw the bear in the rubbish bin. Mesa begged her to let her keep her teddy bear. It was all she had left. But Mrs. Odette, she didn't care. She muttered about the bloodstains, like that mattered more, and just yanked it away. As Tamara's story ended, thick with pain and the memory of Mesa's suffering, James felt as if his world had shifted, every certainty knocked askew. His neatly ordered life as a royal guard, a life of unwavering duty and decorum, seemed suddenly empty, stripped of meaning beside the raw anguish endured by these children. The comparison struck him painfully. The royal family, safe and secure within the grandeur of their castle, and these vulnerable children, exposed to the cruelty of a woman meant to care for them. Memories he had long suppressed came flooding back, vivid and painful. James found himself transported back to his own childhood in an orphanage, a place not unlike St. James. He remembered the cold nights, the ache of being unseen, the constant struggle to survive in a world that seemed indifferent to his existence. He recalled the resilience it had taken to endure those years, the small acts of kindness from a few adults that had kept hope alive in his heart. Now, looking at Tamara's tear-stained face, he saw a reflection of his younger self, scared, alone, but burning with a fierce determination to protect those she cared about. The realization gnawed at him, questioning where his protection was truly needed. Both worlds held their own dangers, one of privilege, the other of hardship. Yet his heart ached, pulling him toward Tamara and Mesa as they cried out for action. James knelt down, bringing himself to Tamara's eye level. His voice, when he spoke, was gentle but filled with resolve. Tamara, I want you to listen to me very carefully. What's happening here, what's been done to you and Mesa, it's not right. It's not your fault, and you don't deserve any of it. Tamara's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope breaking through her fear. James continued, I promise you, I'm going to help. We're going to make sure you and Mesa are safe, and that the people responsible for hurting you are held accountable. As he spoke these words, James felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in years, he felt truly aligned with his purpose. This, he realized, was what it meant to protect and serve. Not just standing guard over buildings and dignitaries, but standing up for those who couldn't defend themselves. But I need you to be brave for a little while longer, he added, his tone serious. I have to report this to the proper authorities. There are people whose job it is to help children in situations like yours. Will you trust me to do that? Tamara nodded, her small hand reaching out to grasp James's much larger one. Will you stay with me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James squeezed her hand gently. I'll stay with you as long as you need me to, he promised. As he stood up, still holding Tamara's hand, James was acutely aware of the enormity of what he was about to do. By leaving his post and intervening in this situation, he was risking his career, his reputation, everything he had worked for. But looking down at Tamara, seeing the trust in her eyes, he knew without a doubt that he was making the right choice. With a deep breath, James pulled out his phone. His fingers hovered over the keypad for a moment before he dialed the number for Child Protective Services. As he waited for someone to answer, he silently vowed to see this through, no matter the personal cost. James began to explain the situation to the person on the other end of the line. He felt a sense of purpose stronger than any he'd experienced in years. This, he realized, was what it truly meant to serve and protect. Not just following orders, but following his conscience, standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. The next few hours swept by in a blur of activity. Child Protective Services arrived, joined by the police, and soon the quiet street outside St. James's Orphanage was alight with flashing sirens and filled with the murmur of official voices. James found himself under questioning, the officers perplexed by the presence of a royal guard in such an unlikely place. He recounted everything he had seen and done, fully aware of the possible repercussions, but unwavering, standing by Tamara's side as she shared her story with the authorities. As the investigation progressed, the depth of the neglect and abuse at the orphanage emerged in stark detail. Mesa was taken to the hospital for treatment, her injuries fortunately less severe than feared. The other children were interviewed one by one, each account stacking up the evidence against Mrs. Odette and the orphanage itself. James stayed close, a steady presence amid the turmoil, as a long overdue reckoning began to unfold. When the scene has been cleared, James suddenly realized how much time had passed. The weight of his actions settled upon him as he hurried back to Windsor Castle, knowing he had been absent from his post for hours. As he approached King Henry Gate, he saw a familiar figure, Oscar just starting his break. The sight of his friend brought a mixture of relief and apprehension. Oscar's face, usually jovial, was creased with worry. "James," Oscar called out, his voice tinged with both concern and resignation. "Where have you been, mate? Someone noticed your post was empty and reported it to the commander. I've been moved here to replace you." He paused, studying James's face. James approached his friend, the guilt evident in his expression. "Oscar, I'm sorry. I know the consequences of what I've done." Oscar sighed, running a hand through his hair. "James, we've been friends for 15 years now. Served together through thick and thin. I've always had your back and you've had mine. But knowing you'll be judged after this is serious." The weight of their shared history hung between them. Memories flashed through James's mind. Long nights on duty, shared jokes during tedious ceremonies, supporting each other through personal hardships. Oscar had been there when James's marriage had fallen apart, offering a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. "I know," James said softly. "I couldn't just walk away, Oscar. This girl, Tamara, needed help, real help." Oscar's expression softened as his gaze shifted to Tamara, standing close to James. "I get it, mate, I really do," he said quietly. "But you know, the commander's waiting, and I promised I'd report the moment I found you. My career's on the line here too if I don't." He hesitated, clearly torn, his eyes reflecting a sympathy for James's choice, but also a reminder of the unbending structure they served within. James nodded, understanding the position he had put his friend in. "I know, Oscar. You're doing your duty. I wouldn't expect anything less from you." Oscar clasped James's shoulder, a gesture of support despite the circumstances. "Was it worth it?" he asked, not unkindly. James thought of Tamara, of the other children at the orphanage, of the abuse that had been uncovered. "Yes," he said without hesitation, "it was." Oscar nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes despite his concern. "Right then, we'd better face the music." As they walked towards the commander's office, Oscar spoke again, his voice low. "Whatever happens in there, James, know that I respect what you did. It might not have been by the book, but it was brave." James felt a surge of gratitude for his friend's understanding. "Thanks, Oscar. That means a lot." They paused outside the commander's door. Oscar gave James's shoulder a final squeeze of support before knocking. "Enter," came the stern voice from within. As they stepped into the office, James straightened his posture, ready to face the consequences of his actions. The commander, a stern figure known for his unwavering dedication to protocol, sat behind his desk, his face a mask of disapproval. "Guard James," the commander began, his voice clipped and formal. "You stand accused of abandoning your post for an extended period. Do you deny this charge?" "No, sir," James replied, standing at attention. "I do not deny it." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Explain yourself." James took a deep breath and recounted the events of the previous day. He spoke of Tamara, of the abuse at the orphanage, of his decision to intervene. As he talked, he could see the commander's expression shifting from stern disapproval to something more complex. When James finished, silence filled the room. The commander leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled before him. You understand, of course, that your actions, while perhaps morally commendable, represent a serious breach of protocol. Your duty is to the royal family and Windsor Castle. Street issues fall under the jurisdiction of the police. I understand, sir, James replied, his voice steady. The commander sighed heavily. You've violated your sacred oath, James. There must be consequences. He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. Until a full review can be conducted and judgment passed, you are dismissed from duty. Please remove your uniform and hat. With a heavy heart but unwavering resolve, James began to remove the symbols of his disciplined life. As he placed his hat on the commander's desk, he felt a strange mix of loss and liberation. James exited the commander's office, no longer in his uniform. As he stepped into the hallway, he saw Oscar waiting with Tamara. The little girl's eyes were wide with worry, and she rushed to James as soon as she saw him. Are you in trouble because of me? Tamara asked, her voice small and filled with guilt. James knelt down beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. It's all right, he told her softly. Sometimes doing the right thing comes with a cost, but that doesn't make it any less right. He looked up at Oscar, who nodded in understanding. Despite the circumstances, there was still a bond of friendship between them, a shared respect that transcended the current situation. As they left the commander's office, Tamara's small hand found its way into James's. What happens now? She asked, looking up at him with trust in her eyes. James squeezed her hand gently. Now, he said, we make sure you and the other children are safe and cared for, and then if you're willing, I'd like to talk about becoming your foster parent. Maybe even adopt you someday. Tamara's eyes widened, a mix of hope and disbelief on her face. Really? James nodded, a warm smile spreading across his face. Really, but first we need to go to the Department of Social Welfare. There's a lot of work to be done to make sure what happened at St. James's never happens again. James felt a profound sense of change. He was leaving behind the life he had known, the safety of routine and protocol. But ahead of him lay a new purpose, a chance to make a real difference in the lives of children like Tamara. The late afternoon air was cool against James's skin as he and Tamara made their way through the streets of Windsor. Without his guard uniform, he felt strangely exposed, yet also lighter somehow. The weight of duty that had pressed upon him for so long had been replaced by a different kind of responsibility, one he had chosen for himself. Tamara's small hand was warm in his as they walked. The cobblestones beneath their feet reflected the warm glow of street lamps, creating pools of light that guided their way. James found himself marveling at how much had changed in just one day. This morning, he had been a royal guard, bound by protocol and tradition. Now he was walking hand in hand with a child he had promised to protect, heading towards an uncertain future. As they approached the Department of Social Welfare, James felt a mix of emotions churning within him. There was anxiety about the challenges that lay ahead, but also a deep sense of purpose. He knew the path will be filled with paperwork, interviews, background checks. The system designed to protect children like Tamara was necessarily thorough and often slow. As they approached the Department of Social Welfare, James felt a mix of emotions churning within him. There was anxiety about the challenges that lay ahead, but also a deep sense of purpose. James? Tamara's voice broke through his thoughts. What's going to happen when we get there? James squeezed her hand reassuringly. Well, we're going to talk to some people whose job it is to help children like you. We'll tell them everything that happened at the orphanage. They'll ask you some questions, and me too. Tamara nodded, her face serious. Will they let me stay with you? James felt his heart constrict at the hope in her voice. He knelt down beside her, bringing himself to her eye level. Tamara, I want to be completely honest with you, he began gently. Right now I can't adopt you. I've just lost my job and I don't have the income to support a child. He saw the disappointment and fear flash across her face and quickly continued. But that doesn't mean I'm abandoning you. Not at all. You might need to go to another orphanage for a while. A good one this time, I promise, but I'm going to do everything I can to become your foster parent." "What does that mean?" Tamara asked, her voice small. "It means that I'm going to find another job as quickly as I can. I'm going to work hard to create a stable home, and as soon as I'm able, I'll apply to be your foster parent. That means you could come live with me even if I haven't officially adopted you yet." He saw a glimmer of hope return to her eyes. "And then, you might adopt me?" James nodded, smiling warmly. "That's the plan. It might take some time, but I promise you, Tamara, I'm not giving up on you. We're in this together now." Tamara's lower lip trembled slightly. "But what if the new orphanage is bad too?" "It won't be," James assured her firmly. "I'm going to make sure of that, and I'll visit you as often as I'm allowed. You're not alone anymore, Tamara. No matter what happens, I'll be there for you. Can you be brave for a little longer?" Tamara took a deep breath, then nodded. "I can try." James smiled at her, feeling a surge of pride. "That's all anyone can ask, and remember, I'll be right there with you every step of the way." As they climbed the steps to the Department of Social Welfare, James felt a sense of stepping into a new chapter of his life. The castle's silhouette was barely visible now, a fading reminder of the life he was leaving behind. He was no longer just a guard, bound by rigid rules and protocols. He was becoming something more, a protector, a guardian, perhaps even a father. With Tamara's hand firmly in his, James pushed open the door. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles they might face, he knew one thing for certain: they would face them together.